Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing Hogwarts, the Sorting Hat, the house system, and some of the muggle characters from the series. More specifically, I'm going to be assigning the unassigned, placing Vernon and Petunia Dursley into the Hogwarts houses that I see fit. In a previous standalone video, I sorted Dudley, so if you haven't seen that, then go and check it out. But today, I'm going to be discussing his parents. Now, sorting occurs at the sorting ceremony, an annual tradition at Hogwarts that falls at the beginning of the school year. The function of the ceremony is to assign new students to one of the four houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin. Students are sorted using the sorting hat, a sentient hat that once belonged to Hogwarts Founder Godric Gryffindor. Recognizing that they each valued very different traits in students, hence the rationale for having four houses in the first place, each founder passed on the main criteria for their particular house to the hat. The student then places the hat on their head and is assigned to a house based on which founder they resemble most. To perform its task, the hat uses legilimency, which is the art of magically navigating through a person's mind. The hat will navigate the layers of the wearer's mind and, after careful consideration, announce its decision loudly so that all can hear. If the hat senses great bravery, Gryffindor is a likely choice. If the hat senses great intelligence, Ravenclaw is a likely choice. If the hat senses that someone is a hard worker, Hufflepuff is a likely choice. And finally, if the hat senses that someone is hungry for power, then Slytherin is a likely choice. Something to bear in mind, however, is that just because someone is sorted into, for example, Gryffindor, proving their bravery, it doesn't mean that they aren't hardworking, ambitious, or clever. It just means that their bravery is perhaps a slightly overarching character trait. This type of logic applies to all of the other houses as well. Without further ado, let's dive into the sorting of Vernon and Petunia Dursley. When Harry's parents were murdered on October 31st, 1981, the decision was made that Harry would be raised by his Aunt Petunia and her family. Part of the reasoning for this was that Harry would remain protected by his mother's loving sacrifice, so long as he could still call the Dursley residence home. Furthermore, the life of fame and fortune that Harry was destined to have may not have been a good start to the young boy's life. So where did he go instead? A place where he couldn't have been treated any less famous: the Dursley residence. The Dursley family was comprised of Vernon, the father, Petunia, the mother, and Dudley, the son. Though they hated any and all things magical, and were perhaps the antithesis of the sort of family that should adopt Harry, they were the safest option. However, while Harry was certainly safe from the Dursleys, at least from a physical standpoint, it was not a good environment to grow up in. They were always massively critical of Harry, and certainly didn't like anything that was out of the ordinary, a tall order when you've adopted a magical young boy. They showed blatant favoritism toward their actual son, Dudley, forced Harry to live in a cupboard under the stairs, tried to prevent him from attending Hogwarts, and always hid his past from him. So, to which house do these monsters belong? Vernon Dursley was an English muggle-born, and arguably Harry's biggest tormentor. He was head honcho in the Dursley household, and worked an office job for a company called Grunnings in London. He was a very safe individual, and didn't like anything out of the ordinary. He had very predictable, ununique perspectives on the world, and had a strong aversion, disliking, of anything that contradicted his own worldview. So, where would I sort Vernon? He wasn't brave, not in the slightest, and this immediately removes Gryffindor from the equation, as you've at least got to be somewhat brave to be in Gryffindor House. He certainly wasn't an intellectual, nor was he particularly studious, and I think that this also eliminates Ravenclaw as a potential option. This leaves Hufflepuff and Slytherin. Hufflepuff could work for him, and I say this purely because he's a hard worker, but I think that the safest bet is Slytherin. Slytherin House is responsible for producing the most evil wizards, and from this I can reasonably derive that they have the least tolerance when it comes to other worldviews. This sounds just like Vernon. Furthermore, one of the most important traits for a Slytherin is ambition, something that Vernon had a lot of. His quirks aside, he was a very driven career man, and wanted to do whatever it took to get to the top. Furthermore, while aspirations of getting to the top can often indicate that someone is a hard worker, like a Hufflepuff, I'm of the impression that Vernon would take whatever shortcuts he could, which makes him more of a Slytherin. This brings us to Petunia. Petunia Dursley, born Petunia Evans, was the sole surviving blood relative of Harry Potter and the sister to Harry's mother, Lily. In spite of this, she was unusually cruel to Harry when he was growing up, and treated him the same way that Vernon did. Despite her obvious, despicable nature, the cold-hearted, evil Petunia that we're introduced to in the books and films wasn't always so bad. In fact, nearer the beginning of her childhood, she was actually just a normal young girl that got along with her sister, the same sister that she would later despise. Lily's magical accomplishments started off quite small, and though Petunia didn't think much of them at first, she eventually began to feel the onset of jealousy. As Lily's magic grew stronger, she received a considerable amount of attention from her parents for her gifts, and I think that Petunia, who had none, just felt left out. Though Petunia was jealous at this stage, she didn't yet hate her sister. In 1971, Lily received her letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It was a momentous occasion for the family, most of them anyway. The youngest daughter of the Evans family was a witch. When Petunia saw Lily receive her letter, she felt a rush of emotions, confusion, anger, but most of all, jealousy. And despite not being magical, she felt compelled to write a letter to Dumbledore himself, asking to attend the school. Hoping to be a part of the magical school herself, Petunia stated her case to Dumbledore and asked if she could study there with her sister. However, given that Petunia was not magical in any way, Dumbledore had to politely decline Petunia's request to attend the school. From that day onward, Petunia denounced magic entirely. It was a world that rejected her, and the pain that she felt from her rejection manifested itself in the form of anger toward her sister, whom she would now refer to as a freak. Unfortunately, it turned her into a very bitter, dark person. But I do think that, deep down, there was an element of good to Petunia. However, this certainly doesn't excuse any of the horrific behavior that she has exhibited. Petunia is perhaps the hardest person to sort, ever, as it's certainly not as simple as she did bad things, therefore she is in Slytherin. Petunia was a complex character with many layers, and had she not been rejected by the wizarding world as a girl, could have turned out to be very different. She doesn't really have one characteristic that meshes exceedingly well with any one house, though I do have an argument for why I feel that she is, oddly enough, a Gryffindor. When Harry Potter was left on their doorstep after Lily and James Potter had been murdered, with only a note explaining what had happened, she must have felt a surge of emotions. First of all, this was the first time that she had been informed that her own sister was dead. Petunia and Lily didn't get along for the majority of their lives, but there was a time when they were children that they would proudly declare their sisterhood. Petunia's biggest fault as a person was that she allowed her rejection from the magical world to transform her into a bitter, cruel person. However, I don't think she ever wanted to be that person. She just lacked the strength of character to deal with her own circumstances. Her main problem was just that she was weak, and I think that, in the moment she realized her own sister was dead, she showed a considerable amount of courage by taking in Harry. Not only was this boy a constant reminder of the world that had rejected her, it was also a constant reminder of her dead sister, the sister that she never got to make amends with. Facing this situation day in and day out would have been exceedingly difficult, and though she didn't do it graciously, she still opted to raise Harry and to keep him safe. As for Dudley, go and check out the link in the description. What do you guys think? Where would you sort Vernon and Petunia Dursley? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on this matter. Comment down below. If you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. You're a wizard, Harry.